Jake stood at the window of his garage, watching the storm with the kind of tired eyes that came from too many sleepless nights. His flannel shirt was stained with grease, his hands rough and calloused from years of working on engines. At 42, he looked older, the kind of older that comes from carrying weight that nobody else can see. Behind him, in the small office that doubled as a living space, his daughter Emma slept on a worn couch. She was 7 years old, with blonde hair that fell across her face and a stuffed rabbit clutched tight in her small hands. The couch was where she slept most nights now, ever since they'd lost the house 6 months ago. Jake had been a Marine once. 2 tours in Afghanistan, a chest full of medals he kept in a box he never opened, and a Purple Heart for the shrapnel that still sat in his left leg, aching every time the weather changed. He'd come home to find his wife had left, unable to handle the nightmares and the silence, and the man who'd returned in place of the boy she'd married. The divorce papers had arrived while he was still in the VA hospital. She'd taken everything except Emma, and even then, she'd tried. But the judge had seen something in Jake's eyes, something that said this man would die before he let his daughter go. So Emma stayed, and Jake learned to be both mother and father to a girl who missed the woman who'd abandoned them both. The repair shop had been his father's before he died. Jake had inherited it along with the debt and the falling apart building and the reputation of being the best mechanic in 3 counties. That reputation kept food on the table barely, but it didn't keep the bank from foreclosing on the house. Didn't keep the power company from threatening to shut off the lights. Didn't keep Jake from lying awake at night, wondering how long he could keep this up before everything fell apart completely. Through the rain-streaked window, Jake saw headlights approaching. Not a car. Motorcycles. Lots of them. The sound of their engines cut through even the thunder, a deep rumbling that made the ground vibrate. Jake's hand instinctively went to his leg, touching the place where the shrapnel sat. He knew that sound, knew what it meant when bikes rolled in formation like that. The motorcycles pulled up to his shop, one after another, 5, 10, 15 of them. Big bikes, Harleys mostly, their chrome catching the lightning. The riders were soaked through, leather jackets dark with rain, water streaming off their helmets. They killed their engines one by one, until the only sound was the storm. Jake moved to the door, but didn't open it. His heart was pounding, and he hated that it was. He'd faced down enemy fire without flinching, but something about this moment made his hands shake. Maybe it was because he had Emma to protect now. Maybe it was because he had nothing left to lose except the one thing that mattered. The lead rider dismounted and walked toward the shop door. He was a big man, 6'4" at least, with a grey beard and arms covered in tattoos. His leather vest had patches Jake recognized. Hell's Angels, East Coast chapter. The man pulled off his helmet, and his face was hard but not unkind. He knocked on the door, not pounding, but firm. Jake took a breath and opened it. The storm tried to push its way inside. The big man stood in the doorway, water dripping from his beard, his eyes studying Jake with an intensity that made the veteran straighten his spine without thinking about it. "Shop closed?" the man asked. His voice was rough, like gravel in a cement mixer. Jake looked past him at the other riders, who were climbing off their bikes, all of them soaked and shivering. "Storm knocked out the power to half the town," Jake said. "I've got a generator running, but just enough for the basics." "We're not looking for service," the big man gestured back at his crew. We're looking for shelter, been riding for 6 hours, and this storm came out of nowhere. Tried to outrun it, but he shrugged. Weather wins every time. Jake's instinct was to say no, to protect Emma, to protect the little they had. Everyone in town knew about the Hells Angels, knew the stories, the reputation, the fear that came with those colors on a leather vest. But Jake also saw something else. He saw 15 people who were cold and wet and tired. He saw human beings who needed help, and he'd been taught a long time ago by a father who'd worked this same garage that you don't turn people away when they need help. Not in a storm, not ever. "Come in," Jake said, stepping back. The big man's eyebrows rose slightly. "You sure?" "I'm sure." Jake held the door open wider. "Bring everyone inside. I'll get some towels." The bikers filed in one by one, bringing with them the smell of rain and leather and motorcycle exhaust. They were a rough-looking bunch, men and women both, covered in tattoos and piercings, and the kind of scars you got from living hard. But they were quiet as they entered, almost respectful, nodding to Jake as they passed. The last one through was a younger guy, maybe mid-20s, with a cut on his forehead that was bleeding through the rain. Jake noticed it immediately, the medic training from his Marine days kicking in automatically. "You're hurt," Jake said. The young man touched his head, looked at the blood on his fingers. "Took a rock to the face about 20 miles back. Road was flooded, couldn't see it coming." "Sit down." Jake pointed to a chair. "I'll clean that up." While Jake worked on the young biker's head, the others spread out through the garage. The big man with the beard, who'd introduced himself as Bear, walked the perimeter like he was securing a position. His eyes took in everything. The tools hanging on pegboards, the ancient truck Jake was working on, the office door that was slightly ajar, through which he could probably see Emma sleeping. "You live here?" Bear asked, his tone careful. "For now." Jake didn't elaborate. He finished bandaging the young biker's head, using supplies from the first aid kit he kept stocked for exactly these kinds of situations. "That'll hold until you can get to a hospital." "Thanks, man." The young biker stood up, testing his balance. "I'm Rhodey, by the way." "Jake?" Bear stepped closer, his massive frame somehow less intimidating now that he was inside, away from the storm and the bikes and the image. "We appreciate this. Not many people would open their door to us." "Yeah, well." Jake started putting away the first aid supplies. "Storm like this, we're all just trying to survive." One of the women bikers, who'd introduced herself as Spade, was wringing out her long black hair. She looked at the office, at Emma sleeping on the couch. "You got a kid?" Jake's protective instincts flared, but he kept his voice even. "My daughter. She's 7. "Pretty brave letting us in with her here," Bear observed. "Or pretty stupid," Jake said with a slight smile. "Jury's still out." That got a laugh from a few of the bikers. The tension in the room eased a fraction. Bear pulled out a pack of cigarettes, then seemed to think better of it, looking at the office where Emma slept. He put them away. "You're a vet," Bear said. It wasn't a question. Jake nodded. "Marines. How'd you know?" "The way you cleared that cut, the way you're standing, the way you sized us all up when we came in." Bear's smile was knowing. "I did 2 tours myself, Army, long time ago." Something shifted in Jake's chest. "Afghanistan? Iraq? First Gulf War?" Bear looked around at his crew. "Half of us here are vets. We ride together because we understand things civilians don't. The noise helps." Jake knew exactly what he meant, the noise of the engines drowning out the other noises, the ones that lived in your head and never really left. The storm raged outside, showing no signs of letting up. Lightning continued to split the sky, and the wind howled like something alive and angry. Inside the garage, the bikers settled in, some sitting on the floor, others leaning against workbenches. They were careful not to touch anything, respectful of Jake's space in a way that surprised him. "We've got some food," Spade said, pulling a backpack around. "Not much, but we can share it." "I've got coffee," Jake offered. "It's instant, but it's hot." "Hot coffee sounds like heaven right now," Rhodey said, and several others agreed. Jake went to the small hot plate in the office, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake Emma. He filled his battered coffee pot with water from a jug and set it to boil. When he turned around, Bear was standing in the doorway, looking at Emma with an expression Jake couldn't quite read. "She's beautiful," Bear said quietly. "Looks like she's dreaming about something nice." "I hope so." Jake watched his daughter sleep, her face peaceful in a way it never seemed to be when she was awake. "She's been through a lot. Haven't we all?" Bear turned to Jake. "Listen, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you let a bunch of dangerous bikers into your shop with your kid sleeping 15 feet away. You're wondering if you made a mistake." Jake didn't confirm or deny it. "I get it," Bear continued. "But I want you to know something. We might look scary and, yeah, some of us have done things we're not proud of, but we don't hurt kids, we don't hurt good people, and we remember kindness." The coffee started to boil, and Jake poured it into an assortment of mismatched mugs. He carried them out to the garage, handing them around. The bikers accepted gratefully, wrapping their cold hands around the warm ceramic, breathing in the steam. They sat like that for a while, drinking coffee and listening to the storm. Someone told a joke about a priest and a rabbi that wasn't very good but got laughs anyway. Someone else started a story about a ride through Montana that ended with a bear and a cooler full of beer. The atmosphere shifted from tense to almost comfortable, like strangers becoming something else. Around midnight, the storm began to ease. The thunder moved off into the distance, and the rain decreased from a torrential downpour to a steady drumming. The bikers started talking about getting back on the road, about making it to wherever they were going. Bear stood and stretched, his leather creaking. "We should probably head out, let you get back to your life." Jake nodded, feeling an unexpected reluctance to see them go. "Roads might still be flooded. You should wait until dawn, make sure it's safe." "Nah, we've ridden through worse." Bear pulled on his helmet, then paused. "How much do we owe you for the shelter, the coffee, the medical attention?" "Nothing," Jake said immediately. "You don't owe me anything." Bear studied him for a long moment. Then he pulled out his wallet and extracted several bills, setting them on the workbench. "For the kid then, buy her something nice." Jake looked at the money. It was at least $300. "I can't take that." "You already did." Bear's tone was final. "Consider it payment for services rendered. You fixed Rhodey's head. That's worth something." The other bikers were adding money to the pile now, bills appearing from pockets and wallets. Jake watched, overwhelmed, as the stack grew. $500, $700, $1,000. "This is too much," Jake protested. "It's not enough," Spade said firmly. "You opened your door when you didn't have to. In weather like this, that could have saved our lives." They filed out one by one, mounting their bikes, the engines roaring to life. Bear was the last to leave. He shook Jake's hand, his grip strong. "You're a good man, Jake Morrison, the kind the world needs more of." Bear pulled a card from his pocket and pressed it into Jake's hand. "You ever need anything, you call that number, day or night, anywhere in the country. You call and we'll come. That's a promise." Then he was gone. The sound of 15 motorcycles fading into the wet night. Jake stood in the doorway of his garage, holding $1,000 in cash and a business card with a phone number and nothing else. He looked up at the clearing sky, where stars were beginning to peek through the breaking clouds. Inside, Emma stirred and sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy? What was all that noise?" "Just some people passing through, baby." Jake went to her, kissing her forehead. "Go back to sleep." "Okay." She lay back down, already drifting off. Jake sat at his desk, looking at the money, trying to process what had just happened. $1,000. That would pay the electric bill, would buy groceries for 2 months, would fix the transmission on his truck that had been slipping, would buy Emma new shoes, ones that actually fit. He thought about Bear's words. "We remember kindness." Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office, watching the storm clouds move away and the stars come out, thinking about strangers and kindness and the unexpected ways the universe sometimes worked. 3 weeks passed. Jake used the money carefully, stretching every dollar. Emma got new shoes and a winter coat that didn't have holes in the lining. The electric bill got paid with enough left over that Jake didn't have to choose between heat and food. The transmission got fixed. For the first time in months, Jake felt like he could breathe without his chest being tight with worry. He thought about the bikers sometimes, wondered where they'd ended up, if they'd made it to wherever they were going safely. He kept Bear's card in his wallet, but he didn't call. What would he say? Thanks for the money? It seemed inadequate. Then, on a Tuesday morning in early November, Jake was under a Ford pickup, working on a starter, when he heard motorcycles. Lots of them. The sound was unmistakable, that deep rumbling that seemed to come from the earth itself. He rolled out from under the truck, wiping his hands on a rag, and walked to the garage door. What he saw made him stop dead. The street was full of motorcycles. Not 15 this time. Dozens, maybe 100 or more, stretched out as far as he could see in both directions. They lined both sides of Main Street, their riders sitting still and silent, engines idling. And at the front, parked directly in front of Jake's shop, was Bear's bike. The big man dismounted and walked toward Jake, his face serious. Behind him, the other riders began to dismount too, like a choreographed movement. Jake's heart was pounding. What was happening? Had he done something wrong? Was this some kind of biker code he'd violated without knowing? "Jake Morrison," Bear said, his voice carrying in the quiet morning air. "Bear." Jake's throat was dry. "What's going on?" Bear reached into his vest and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Jake, who opened it with shaking hands. It was a deed to his house, the house the bank had foreclosed on 6 months ago. Jake stared at it, not understanding, the words swimming in front of his eyes. "We bought it back," Bear said simply. "The house is yours again, free and clear." Jake's legs felt weak. I can't." "You can and you will." Bear's voice was firm but kind. "When we left here that night, we talked about you, about your kindness, about what you did for us. We made some calls, found out about your situation, about the house, about your daughter sleeping on a couch in an office." Spade stepped forward. She was smiling. "We took up a collection, All the chapters, East Coast to West Coast. Hell's Angels don't forget when someone treats us like human beings, especially not a vet who's struggling. Jake's vision blurred. He tried to speak, but no words came out. That's not all, Bear continued. He gestured, and several bikers began unloading things from their bikes and from a truck that had pulled up behind them. Tools. New tools, still in their boxes. A commercial-grade air compressor. A lift for the garage. Equipment Jake had dreamed about, but could never afford. "We heard your equipment was pretty outdated," Rhodey said, grinning. "Figured we'd help you upgrade." More bikers were bringing things now. A new couch, bags of groceries, toys, a bike for Emma, pink with streamers on the handlebars and training wheels, box after box of supplies, of food, of things Jake needed, and things he didn't even know he needed. "There's also this." Bear handed him another envelope. Inside was a check. Jake looked at the amount and nearly dropped it. $25,000. "For the business," Bear explained, "to get it really going, to pay off any debts, to give you a cushion so you're not living one broken transmission away from disaster." Jake's hand went to his mouth. Tears were streaming down his face now, and he didn't care who saw. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you do this?" Bear put a hand on Jake's shoulder, and his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Because you opened your door when you didn't have to. Because you saw us as people, not as something to be afraid of. Because you're a vet who's struggling, and we take care of our own, because your daughter deserves better than sleeping on a couch." He paused, his voice getting rougher with emotion. "But mostly because the world is full of people who slam doors in our faces, who cross the street when they see us coming, who judge us by our appearance and our reputation and never bother to look deeper. You didn't do that. You saw 15 cold, wet people, and you said, 'Come in.' That's rare, Jake. That's precious. And we wanted to make sure you know that kindness doesn't go unnoticed." The other bikers had gathered around now, forming a circle. There were tears on more than one face. Spade was crying openly, not bothering to hide it. Rhodey had his arm around another biker's shoulders, both of them smiling through their tears. Jake couldn't hold it together anymore. He broke down completely, sobbing like he hadn't sobbed since the day he came home from Afghanistan. Bear pulled him into a hug, this massive biker holding a broken veteran, and Jake felt something crack open inside his chest. All the fear, all the worry, all the exhaustion of trying to keep going when everything was falling apart, it all came pouring out. "Thank you," Jake managed to say. "Thank you." "Thank you," Bear corrected him, "for reminding us that there's still good in the world." The school bus arrived then, like it did every afternoon at 3:15. Emma got off, her little backpack bouncing, and stopped dead when she saw the motorcycles filling the street. Her eyes went wide, and for a second Jake saw fear on her face. Then she saw her father, saw him standing with these people, saw his tears and his smile. She ran to him, and Jake scooped her up, holding her tight. "Daddy, what's happening?" Emma asked, her voice a mix of confusion and excitement. "Something good, baby." Jake kissed her head. "Something really, really good." Bear knelt down so he was at Emma's level. "Hi there. I'm Bear. Your dad helped me and my friends a few weeks ago when we were stuck in a storm. We wanted to say thank you." Emma studied him with the serious expression children get when they're trying to figure out if someone is trustworthy. "You have a big beard?" she observed. Bear laughed, a booming sound that made several of the bikers chuckle. "I do. It keeps my face warm. We got you something, Spade said, rolling the pink bike forward. Do you like bikes? Emma's face lit up like the sun. A bike! Daddy, look, it's pink. I see it, baby. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. The bikers helped move everything into the shop, setting up the new equipment, organizing the tools. Some of them went to Jake's house, the house that was his again, and started cleaning it, making it ready for them to move back in. Word spread through Millbrook, and people started coming out to see what was happening. At first, they were nervous, the same kind of nervous Jake had been that stormy night. But then, they saw the bikers laughing with Emma, teaching her how to ride her new bike in the parking lot. They saw them carrying groceries and furniture. They saw the tears and the hugs and the genuine joy on everyone's faces. Mrs. Henderson from the diner brought over a tray of sandwiches. Figured you all might be hungry, she said shyly. Thank you, Mom, Bear said, accepting them with a grateful nod. Old Tom from the hardware store showed up with paint and brushes. Heard you folks are fixing up Jake's place. Thought I'd contribute. By evening, half the town was involved. The hardware store had donated supplies. The diner provided food. The church ladies brought casseroles and desserts. It had turned into something bigger than just the bikers helping Jake. It had become a community coming together, fear dissolving into understanding, strangers becoming neighbors. As the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink, Jake stood in the doorway of his house, his real house, and looked at what had been accomplished. The walls had been painted, the floors cleaned, furniture arranged. It looked like a home again. Emma was asleep on her new bed, exhausted from excitement, her pink bike parked carefully beside her dresser. Jake tucked her in, smoothing her hair back from her face. She smiled in her sleep, and his heart felt so full he thought it might burst. Outside, the bikers were packing up, getting ready to head out. They'd accomplished what they came to do. Jake walked out to thank them one more time, knowing that no words would ever be enough. Bear was strapping down his gear, but he stopped when he saw Jake approaching. How's the kid? Sleeping like an angel. Jake struggled to find the right words. Bear, I don't know how to thank you. All of you, you've changed our lives. You changed ours first. Bear extended his hand. That night in the storm, you reminded us of something we'd forgotten, that we're not just the clubs we ride for or the patches we wear. We're people, and people take care of each other. They shook hands, and then, impulsively, Jake pulled the big man into a hug. Bear hugged him back, hard, and Jake heard him whisper, Semper Fi, brother. Semper Fi, Jake whispered back, even though he'd been a Marine and Bear had been Army, because it didn't matter. They were both veterans, both survivors, both men who understood what it meant to look out for your brothers. One by one, the bikers said their goodbyes. Spade kissed Jake's cheek and told him to take care of himself. Rhodey promised to come back and visit, to check out the new equipment. Others just nodded, their actions having said everything that needed to be said. As the sun disappeared below the horizon and the stars came out, the motorcycles roared to life one last time. They rolled out in formation, their lights creating a river of brightness in the darkness. Jake stood watching until the last tail light disappeared, until the sound of engines faded into nothing. Then he turned and looked at his town, at his garage with its new equipment, at his house with lights glowing in the windows, at the life that had been impossible just hours ago and was now his reality. Mrs. Henderson approached, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I judged them, she admitted. When I saw all those motorcycles, I assumed the worst, but they were just good people doing a good thing. Yeah, Jake agreed. They really were. You know what the craziest part is? Old Tom said, shaking his head in wonder. They didn't have to do any of this. They could have just ridden on that night and never thought about you again. But they remembered, Jake said softly. They remembered kindness. The town talked about what happened for weeks afterward. The story spread beyond Millbrook, carried by local news stations and then bigger ones. Hell's Angels helped struggling veteran. The headlines read, people were surprised, skeptical even. It didn't fit the narrative they knew. But Jake understood something most people didn't. He understood that people were complicated, that the same group that society feared and judged could also be capable of extraordinary kindness. That beneath the leather and the tattoos and the rough exterior were human beings with hearts that could break and heal and love. He also understood that what he'd done, opening his door to strangers in a storm, hadn't been extraordinary to him. It had been basic human decency, but in a world where people were increasingly turning inward, where fear of the unknown made people lock their doors and their hearts, even basic decency had become remarkable. 6 months later, Jake's repair shop was thriving. The new equipment meant he could take on bigger jobs. Word had spread about what happened, and people came from 3 counties over to get their vehicles serviced by the veteran mechanic who'd been helped by the Hells Angels. Some came out of curiosity, but they came back because Jake was good at what he did and because he treated everyone with respect. Emma was flourishing too. She had her own room now, painted purple because that was her favorite color this week. She had friends from school who came over to play. She laughed more, had nightmares less, talked about her future with the kind of confidence that only comes from feeling secure. And Jake? Well, Jake slept better at night. The nightmares were still there, probably always would be, but they were quieter now, easier to shake off. He'd learned that accepting help wasn't weakness. That community mattered, that opening yourself up to others, even when it was scary, could lead to miracles. He kept Bear's card in his wallet, but he also kept something else now. A photograph that Rhodey had sent him a month after that day. It showed all of them, Jake and Emma, surrounded by bikers, everyone smiling. On the back, Bear had written, "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most." Jake had that photograph framed and hanging in his office, where he could see it every day. A reminder that on one stormy night, he'd made a choice, a simple choice to see people as people, to offer shelter when it was needed, to show kindness when fear would have been easier. And that choice had changed everything. On the anniversary of that night, a package arrived at Jake's shop. Inside was a leather vest, custom-made, with a patch on the back. It showed angel wings surrounding a wrench and a Marine Corps emblem. Underneath, embroidered in careful stitching, were the words, "Honorary Member, Hells Angels, East Coast Chapter." There was a note, too, in Bear's distinctive handwriting. "You earned this not by riding with us, but by showing us who we wanted to be. Wear it proud, brother. You're one of us now." Jake hung the vest in his office, right next to the photograph. He didn't wear it, didn't feel right doing that, but he looked at it often, and every time he did, he remembered that stormy night. Remembered 15 cold, wet strangers standing in his garage. Remembered making the choice to help when he had nothing to give. And he remembered that sometimes, in our darkest moments, when we're struggling just to survive, the greatest gift we can offer is our humanity, our willingness to see others not as threats, but as fellow travelers on this difficult journey called life. Jake taught this lesson to Emma as she grew. He told her the story of the storm and the bikers and the incredible gift they'd given. But more than that, he taught her through his actions. He taught her to help when she could, to look beyond appearances, to judge people by their actions, not their reputation, to remember that kindness, even small acts of kindness, ripples outward in ways we can't always see. Years later, when Emma was in high school, she wrote an essay about that night for a scholarship application. She called it, "The Night Angels Came to Millbrook." In it, she wrote, "My father taught me that courage isn't always about facing danger. Sometimes it's about facing our fears, our prejudices, our assumptions about what we think we know." On a stormy night, he opened a door when most people would have kept it locked. He made himself vulnerable when vulnerability felt dangerous. He chose compassion over caution. And because of that choice, I have a home. My father has a thriving business. Our town learned that the people we fear are often just people who need the same things we all need: shelter, warmth, understanding, acceptance. The Hells Angels who rode into our town that night weren't looking to cause trouble. They were looking for help. And my father, a veteran who had nothing except a daughter and a dream of keeping her safe, gave it to them without hesitation. What they gave back was more than money or equipment or even our house. They gave us hope. They showed us that humanity still exists, even in the most unexpected places. They proved that when we treat others with dignity and respect, the universe has a way of balancing the scales. I carry this lesson with me every day. When I see someone who looks different, who makes me nervous, who doesn't fit into what I think I know, I remember those bikers. I remember their kindness and their tears and their genuine desire to help a struggling family. And I remember that the greatest gift we can give each other is the benefit of the doubt, the chance to prove that we are more than our appearances, more than our reputations, more than the stereotypes others place on us. We're just people trying to make it through this life. And sometimes all we need is someone to open a door and say, "Come in," to offer shelter from the storm, both literal and figurative, to show us that we are not alone, that we matter, that our humanity is recognized and valued. My father did that for 15 strangers, and they, in turn, did it for us. And now I try to do it for others, because that's how we change the world, one open door at a time. Emma won the scholarship. She went to college to study social work, determined to spend her life helping others the way her family had been helped. Jake was prouder of that essay than any grade she'd ever brought home, because it meant she understood. She'd learned the most important lesson he could teach her. On quiet nights, when the shop was closed and Emma was away at school, Jake would sometimes sit in his office and think about that stormy night. He'd look at the photograph and the vest and remember every detail: the sound of the thunder, the sight of those 15 bikes pulling up, the fear and the decision and the unexpected outcome. And he'd think about all the times before and since when he'd had a choice: to help or to turn away, to open the door or keep it locked, to trust or to fear. And he'd think about how those choices, small as they seemed in the moment, had shaped not just his life, but the lives of everyone around him. Because that's what choices do. They ripple outward, touching people we'll never meet, changing stories we'll never hear, creating connections that span years and miles, and differences that seem insurmountable. On the night of that storm, Jake Morrison made a choice. A simple choice, born of basic human decency and a heart that still believed in goodness despite everything he'd been through. And 15 bikers remembered. They remembered, and they honored that kindness with their own. And in doing so, they started a chain reaction of compassion that spread far beyond one small town in the middle of nowhere. Because that's the thing about kindness. It's contagious. It spreads. It grows. One act of compassion inspires another, which inspires another, until suddenly the world is a little bit brighter, a little bit better, a little bit more human. Jake Morrison learned that lesson on a stormy night from 15 strangers who became family. And he spent the rest of his life paying it forward, opening doors, offering shelter, showing kindness to everyone who needed it. Because that's what we're meant to do. Take care of each other, see each other, remember that beneath all our differences, we're all just people trying to survive the storms life throws at us. And sometimes, all it takes to change everything is one person willing to open a door and say, "Come in. You're safe here. You're welcome here. You're seen here." That's the gift Jake gave. That's the gift the bikers returned. And that's the gift we can all give to each other every single day, if we're brave enough to choose compassion over fear, one open door at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one choice at a time. That's how we change the world. That's how we remember what it means to be human.